What I'm about to reveal to you was never meant to leave the shadows. These are the psychological warfare tactics that Machiavelli discovered but kept hidden in his private letters, the ones that were never published, the ones that would have gotten him executed even faster than his public works. For centuries, these methods have been passed down in whispers among the most powerful families, the shadow brokers, the puppet masters who control empires from behind curtains. You see, everyone knows about the prince. That was Machiavelli's job application, his resume to get back into politics after his exile. But what nobody talks about are the techniques he developed during his years of observation, the psychological manipulation methods he witnessed in the courts of the Borgias, the mental warfare strategies he saw deployed by Cesare Borgia himself. These weren't theories written in books. These were survival mechanisms tested in blood. Tonight, I'm going to teach you the forbidden knowledge, the techniques that separate those who rule from those who are ruled. The invisible methods that make people bend to your will while believing it was their own idea. The psychological triggers that bypass rational thought and tap directly into the primitive brain where all real decisions are made. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly navigate complex social situations while you struggle? Why certain individuals can walk into any room and immediately command respect without saying a word? Why some people always seem to know exactly what to say to get what they want? It's not charisma, it's not luck, it's not even intelligence in the traditional sense. It's knowledge, forbidden knowledge. The kind of understanding about human psychology that most people will never possess because they're too afraid to look into the darkness of human nature. They prefer their comfortable illusions about how the world works. You're different. You're here because you understand that the world is not governed by the rules they taught you in school. You know that behind every smile is a calculation, behind every favor is an agenda, behind every friendship is a transaction. You've seen enough to know that the game is always being played, whether you choose to play it or not. So let me show you how to play it better than everyone else. The first forbidden technique Machiavelli discovered is what I call the perception anchor. This is the ability to control how people see reality itself, not just how they see you. Most people think influence is about changing minds, but that's amateur-level thinking. True masters don't change minds, they change the lens through which people perceive information. Here's how it works. Every human being filters reality through their existing beliefs and emotions. They don't see what's actually there, they see what their brain expects to see based on the context you provide. Machiavelli noticed that Cesare Borgia never tried to convince people of anything. Instead, he created situations where people would convince themselves. Let me give you a modern example. Imagine you want someone to value your time more. The amateur approach is to tell them directly, maybe get angry, maybe explain how busy you are. The perception anchor approach is different. You create a context where they discover your value themselves. You might mention casually that you had to reschedule something important to meet with them. You don't complain about it, you don't make them feel guilty, you just plant the seed that your time is in demand. Then you demonstrate competence in some area they care about. Maybe you solve a problem they've been struggling with, or you display knowledge about something they're interested in. What happens next is crucial. Their brain starts connecting dots. They begin to see you as someone whose time is valuable because other people clearly value it, and because you've demonstrated capability. They didn't reach this conclusion because you argued them into it. They reached it because you controlled the information flow and let their own psychology do the work. This is infinitely more powerful than direct persuasion, because people trust conclusions, they reach themselves far more than conclusions others try to impose on them. You become the puppet master of their own thought process. The second forbidden technique is called emotional hijacking, and this is where things get really dangerous. Machiavelli observed that rational thought is actually the exception in human behavior, not the rule. Most decisions are made by the emotional brain and then rationalized by the logical brain afterward. If you can control the emotional state, you control the decision. But here's what separates this from basic emotional manipulation. Amateurs try to create emotions in people. Masters trigger emotions that are already there. Every person carries within them a complex web of fears, desires, insecurities, and ambitions. They're like psychological buttons waiting to be pressed. The key is learning to identify these buttons and activate them so subtly that the person never realizes what happened. Let's say you're dealing with someone who has a deep need to be seen as intelligent. This isn't uncommon, especially among educated professionals. You don't flatter their intelligence directly, that's too obvious. Instead, you present them with a problem that allows them to demonstrate their intelligence to themselves. You might say something like, "I've been thinking about this challenge, and I can't quite figure it out." Someone with your background might see an angle I'm missing. What you've done is created a scenario where their ego becomes invested in helping you. They're not helping because you asked nicely, they're helping because solving your problem makes them feel intelligent. You've hijacked their need for intellectual validation and redirected it toward your goal. The beauty of this technique is that it makes people feel good about themselves while they're doing what you want them to do. They associate you with positive emotions because you provide opportunities for them to feel the way they want to. You become a drug dealer for their psychological needs. Now let me teach you the third technique, and this one might be the most powerful of all. It's called strategic vulnerability, and it's based on a counterintuitive principle that Machiavelli discovered through careful observation of court dynamics. He noticed that the most influential people weren't those who appeared strongest, but those who appeared strong while revealing carefully chosen weaknesses. This works because humans have a deep psychological need to feel needed. When someone appears perfect or invulnerable, it creates distance. People can't relate, they can't help, they can't feel superior in any way. But when you reveal specific, strategic vulnerabilities, you create connection and you activate their helper instinct. The key word here is strategic. You're not actually vulnerable, you're performing vulnerability in a way that serves your purposes. You choose weaknesses that make you more relatable without making you less respected. You reveal struggles that invite support without revealing information that could be used against you. For example, you might mention that you're terrible at remembering people's birthdays, but you always remember the important conversations you have with them. This makes you seem human and relatable while actually highlighting your ability to focus on what matters. Or you might admit that you sometimes work too late because you get absorbed in projects you care about. This frames a potential negative as evidence of passion and dedication. What happens when you deploy strategic vulnerability correctly is that people feel like they're seeing the real you, which creates intimacy and trust. But what they're actually seeing is a carefully curated version of you designed to elicit specific responses. They feel closer to you, they want to help you, they start to invest emotionally in your success. This is how you build a network of people who are psychologically invested in your well-being without ever asking them to be. They choose to support you because supporting you makes them feel good about themselves. The fourth forbidden technique is what I call reality distortion, and this is perhaps the most advanced psychological warfare method Machiavelli ever documented. It's the ability to make people question their own perceptions and rely on yours instead. This isn't gaslighting, which is crude and obvious. This is far more sophisticated. Reality distortion works by becoming the most reliable source of information in someone's environment. You do this by consistently providing accurate, useful information about things they care about. You become their go-to source for understanding what's happening around them. Once you've established this position, you have incredible influence over how they interpret events. Let me show you how this works in practice. You start by being the person who always seems to know what's really going on. When there's office gossip, you have the accurate version. When there are industry changes, you understand the implications. When there are social dynamics at play, you can explain the underlying motivations. You don't position yourself as all-knowing. Instead, you position yourself as someone who pays attention and thinks critically. You share insights that prove to be correct. You predict outcomes that come to pass. Gradually, people start checking with you to understand what things mean. Once you've established yourself as a reliable interpreter of reality, you can begin to shape how people understand new information. You don't lie to them, that would destroy your credibility. Instead, you provide context and framing that serves your interests. You help them see patterns that support your goals. You highlight aspects of situations that benefit your position while downplaying aspects that don't. The result is that people start seeing the world through your lens without realizing it. Your interpretation of events becomes their interpretation. Your priorities become their priorities. Your enemies become their enemies. You've essentially installed your worldview into their minds, and they think it's their own. This is how political leaders control entire populations. This is how cult leaders maintain power over their followers. This is how master manipulators turn groups of people into extensions of their own will. The fifth technique is called invisible authority, and it's based on Machiavelli's observation that true power is often most effective when it's not obvious. Visible authority creates resistance. People naturally push back against obvious attempts to control them, but invisible authority bypasses this resistance entirely. Invisible authority works by making people want to defer to you without feeling like they're being dominated. You achieve this by becoming the person others naturally turn to for guidance, not because you demand it, but because you consistently provide value in ways that matter to them. The key is to solve problems that others can't solve, or to solve them in ways that others can't replicate. You become indispensable not through force or manipulation, but through competence and strategic positioning. People start coming to you because you get results, but here's the crucial part. You never make them feel stupid or inferior for needing your help. Instead, you make them feel smart for recognizing your value. You make them feel like they're making a wise choice by working with you. You make them feel like partners rather than subordinates. What this creates is a situation where people voluntarily give you authority over areas of their lives because they trust your judgment more than their own. They're not following orders, they're following advice. They're not being controlled, they're being guided. The end result is the same, but the psychological dynamic is completely different. This is how you build real, lasting influence. Not through fear or manipulation, but through becoming genuinely indispensable to the people around you. When people need you more than you need them, you hold all the cards. But when they don't realize the extent of their dependence, they never think to challenge your position. Now let me teach you the sixth forbidden technique, and this one will change how you handle conflict forever. It's called controlled escalation, and it's based on Machiavelli's understanding that most people are terrified of confrontation and will do almost anything to avoid it. Controlled escalation works by gradually increasing pressure in a situation until the other person chooses to give you what you want rather than face the discomfort of continued conflict. The key is that the escalation appears natural and justified, not manipulative or aggressive. You start with reasonable requests and logical arguments. When those don't work, you don't get angry or demanding. Instead, you simply increase the stakes. You might involve other people whose opinions matter to them. You might make the consequences of inaction more visible. You might create time pressure that forces a decision. At each step, you give them an easy way out that involves giving you what you want. You're not backing them into a corner, you're providing them with a path that leads where you want to go. The pressure comes from the situation, not from you personally. Most people will take the path of least resistance long before the situation becomes truly uncomfortable. They'll agree to your original request rather than deal with the escalating complexity and pressure. From their perspective, they're making a reasonable choice to resolve an increasingly difficult situation. From your perspective, you've gotten what you wanted without ever having to be directly confrontational or manipulative. The situation did the work for you. You simply created the conditions where your desired outcome became the most attractive option available. The seventh technique is called emotional anchoring, and it's perhaps the most subtle form of psychological influence ever developed. It works by associating yourself with positive emotional states in other people's minds so that they seek out your presence when they want to feel good. This isn't about making people happy. Happiness is temporary and shallow. This is about making people feel the deeper emotions they crave: significance, understanding, validation, excitement, security. Whatever their core emotional needs are, you become associated with fulfilling them. You do this by paying attention to what makes each person feel most alive and valued, then creating opportunities for them to experience those feelings in your presence. If someone craves intellectual stimulation, You bring up fascinating topics when you're with them. If someone needs to feel important, you ask for their advice on matters they care about. If someone wants to feel understood, you demonstrate that you see and appreciate their unique qualities. Over time, your presence becomes linked in their minds with feeling good about themselves. They start seeking out your company not because they consciously decide to, but because being around you satisfies psychological needs they might not even be aware of. This creates a form of psychological dependency that's incredibly powerful because it's based on genuine positive feelings rather than fear or manipulation. People want to be around you, they want to help you, they want to include you in their plans because you make their lives feel richer and more meaningful. The eighth forbidden technique is called information asymmetry, and it's based on the principle that knowledge is power, but strategic ignorance can be even more powerful. Most people try to learn everything they can about every situation. Masters understand that sometimes appearing to know less than you actually do gives you significant advantages. When people think you don't fully understand a situation, they'll often reveal more information than they intended to. They'll explain things they wouldn't normally explain. They'll share insights they would keep private if they thought you were a threat. They'll underestimate your ability to use information against them. This technique requires discipline because it goes against our natural instincts. We want to show how smart we are, how much we know, how quickly we can grasp complex situations. But strategic ignorance means asking questions you already know the answers to, appearing confused about things you understand perfectly, and letting others feel intellectually superior while they unknowingly give you everything you need to outmaneuver them. The key is knowing when to reveal your true understanding. You gather information while appearing harmless, then demonstrate your actual knowledge at the moment when it will have maximum impact. The surprise factor alone is often enough to completely shift the power dynamic in your favor. People who thought they were dealing with someone naive suddenly realize they've been sharing sensitive information with someone who understands the game better than they do. By the time they realize what happened, you're already several moves ahead. The ninth technique is called manufactured scarcity, and it's based on the psychological principle that people value things more when they believe those things are rare or difficult to obtain. This applies not just to objects, but to access, attention, approval, and opportunities. Most people make themselves too available. They respond immediately to every request. They say yes to every invitation. They make their time and attention feel unlimited. This actually decreases their perceived value because humans are wired to assume that anything easily available must not be very important. Manufactured scarcity works by making your time, attention, and approval feel limited and valuable. You don't do this by being rude or unavailable. Instead, you create the impression that you have many options and opportunities competing for your attention. You might mention other commitments when someone asks for your time, not to make them feel unimportant, but to help them understand that your time is in demand. You might take slightly longer to respond to messages, not to play games, but to demonstrate that you're not sitting around waiting for communication. When you do give someone your attention, you make it feel special and focused. You're fully present, you ask thoughtful questions, you remember details from previous conversations. This creates a contrast that makes your attention feel valuable and meaningful. The result is that people start competing for your time and approval without you ever asking them to. They begin to see access to you as a privilege rather than a given. They put more effort into their interactions with you because they understand that your attention is something worth earning. The final forbidden technique is called psychological mirroring, and it represents the absolute pinnacle of social influence, the most sophisticated and advanced form of human persuasion ever developed. This technique transcends everything we've discussed so far because it works by creating a profound psychological reflection that makes people feel not just heard or understood, but truly seen at the deepest level of their being. When you master psychological mirroring, you become like a perfectly calibrated instrument that can resonate with another person's inner world so completely that they experience a sense of recognition and validation they may have never felt before. This goes far beyond simple mimicry or copying someone's body language, which are merely surface-level tactics that any amateur can attempt. True psychological mirroring is an art form that involves understanding the intricate, complex patterns of how someone thinks, feels, processes information, and makes decisions. It requires you to become a psychological archaeologist, carefully excavating the layers of someone's personality to understand not just what they believe, but why they believe it, how those beliefs were formed, and what emotional experiences shaped their worldview. Then you present yourself as someone who not only shares their fundamental perspective on reality, but who can articulate their own thoughts and feelings better than they can themselves, all while subtly and elegantly guiding them toward your desired outcomes. The process begins with what I call psychological reconnaissance, a systematic approach to identifying their core beliefs, values, fears, motivations, and the underlying emotional drivers that dictate their behavior. This isn't casual observation. It's strategic intelligence gathering that requires you to become a master reader of human nature. You listen not just to the words they speak, but to the entire symphony of their communication, the tone, the pace, the emotional inflection, what they choose to emphasize and what they gloss over, what topics make them light up with enthusiasm, and what subjects cause them to become defensive or withdrawn. You notice what triggers emotional responses, what makes them feel excited versus anxious, what validates their sense of identity versus what threatens it. Pay attention to their language patterns because people reveal their entire psychological operating system through the words they choose. Some people speak in visual terms. They see what you mean, they want to look at options, they need to picture the outcome. Others are auditory, things sound good to them, they want to hear your thoughts, they need ideas to resonate with them. Still others are kinesthetic. They want to feel right about decisions. They need to grasp concepts. They're looking for approaches that click with them. When you identify and match their primary processing style, your communication becomes exponentially more persuasive because you're literally speaking their mental language. But the real mastery comes in understanding their emotional architecture, the deep psychological structures that determine how they see themselves and their place in the world. Are they someone who sees themselves as a protector, always looking out for others and making decisions based on how they'll affect the people they care about? Are they a seeker, constantly looking for growth, meaning, and new experiences? Are they a builder, focused on creating security, stability, and tangible results? Are they a rebel, defining themselves in opposition to conventional thinking and always looking for ways to challenge the status quo? Once you identify their core psychological identity, you have the blueprint for everything that will motivate or demotivate them. Once you understand their psychological patterns with this level of depth and precision, you can present your ideas in ways that feel not just natural and obvious to them, but inevitable, as if they were conclusions they were already moving toward, and you simply help them arrive there faster. You begin using their exact language patterns, their specific terminology, their unique way of describing experiences and concepts. You reference their values not just in passing, but as the foundation for every suggestion you make. You acknowledge their concerns before they even voice them, demonstrating that you understand not just what they're thinking, but what they're worried about thinking. You frame your suggestions as logical extensions of beliefs they already hold, as natural next steps in directions they're already moving. The key principle that separates true masters from amateurs is this: you're not changing who you are or pretending to be someone you're not. Instead, you're becoming a skilled translator, finding ways to express your authentic self and your genuine goals in terms that resonate perfectly with their psychological makeup. You're discovering the real, legitimate connections between what you want to achieve and what they value, then illuminating those connections while strategically minimizing or reframing areas of potential conflict. This isn't deception, it's sophisticated communication that honors both your authenticity and their psychological reality. When executed with true skill and precision, psychological mirroring creates an almost magical experience for the other person. They feel like you're the first person in their life who truly gets them at a fundamental level. They experience a sense of being seen, validated, and intellectually connected that's so rare and powerful it creates an immediate and lasting bond. They find themselves thinking, finally, someone who understands how I see the world. This psychological recognition triggers deep feelings of trust, appreciation, and openness that make them exponentially more receptive to your influence and dramatically more likely to follow your guidance. But here's what elevates this technique from mere social skill to genuine psychological artistry. Once you've established this profound connection and earned their trust through authentic understanding, you can begin to gradually introduce new ideas, perspectives, and possibilities that expand their thinking in directions that serve your purposes. Because they trust you completely and feel understood by you at such a deep level, they become genuinely excited to consider viewpoints and explore options they might automatically reject if they came from anyone else. They don't experience this as you trying to change their mind. They experience it as you helping them discover new aspects of their own thinking. You essentially become their guide into new ways of perceiving reality and new possibilities for their life. You help them evolve their beliefs, expand their comfort zone, and modify their behaviors in ways that serve your goals while simultaneously providing them with genuine growth, new insights, and expanded capabilities. This represents influence at its absolute highest level, the point where strategic manipulation becomes completely indistinguishable from wise mentorship, where getting what you want becomes synonymous with helping them become who they're capable of being. The most sophisticated practitioners understand that when you do this correctly, the person doesn't just comply with your suggestions. They become genuinely grateful for your influence in their life. They feel like you've helped them see things more clearly, make better decisions, and access parts of themselves they didn't know existed. They credit you with helping them grow, and they're absolutely right to do so, even though that growth happened to align perfectly with your objectives. Now, let me address something crucial that I need you to understand clearly. These techniques are not about becoming a manipulative person or using psychological insights to harm or exploit others. They're about developing a sophisticated understanding of the psychological realities that govern all human interaction and learning to work with those realities more skillfully and effectively to achieve your legitimate goals. The uncomfortable truth is that influence and persuasion are happening in every human interaction, whether we're conscious of it or not. The only question is whether you're going to be skillful or clumsy, ethical or selfish, effective or ineffective in how you navigate these dynamics. The world is already full of people who use these methods, often unconsciously and frequently for purely selfish purposes. Every advertisement you see, every political message you hear, every sales interaction you have involves someone attempting to influence your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. By learning these techniques yourself, you're not becoming more manipulative than everyone else around you. You're becoming conscious and competent in dynamics that are already shaping your life every single day. You're developing the awareness to recognize when others are using these methods on you, and the skills to respond from a position of strength rather than unconscious reactivity. Knowledge is indeed power, but knowledge without wisdom and ethical grounding is extraordinarily dangerous. These techniques should always be employed to create win-win situations where you achieve your objectives while genuinely helping others get what they truly want and need. The most effective and sustainable influence always involves mutual benefit, even when that mutual benefit isn't immediately obvious to all parties involved. When you help people get what they want while getting what you want, you create positive cycles of trust, cooperation, and mutual support that compound over time. The people who achieve true mastery in these methods understand a profound principle: the best influence doesn't feel like influence at all. It feels like natural connection, authentic understanding, and mutual benefit unfolding organically. Everyone involved feels genuinely good about the interaction and satisfied with the outcomes. The fact that one person orchestrated and guided the entire dynamic remains completely invisible, not because it's hidden through deception, but because it's integrated so skillfully that it becomes indistinguishable from natural rapport and genuine care. This is how you successfully navigate a complex world where everyone has hidden agendas, unconscious motivations, and competing interests while maintaining your own integrity and consistently achieving your most important goals. This is how you protect yourself from those who might use these techniques against you in unethical ways, while simultaneously using them responsibly to improve your own life and positively impact the lives of people you care about. You become someone who can see the psychological chess game that's always being played, and you develop the skills to play that game with wisdom, effectiveness, and genuine care for others. Remember, these are not just techniques to be pulled out and deployed in special circumstances. They represent a comprehensive approach to understanding and working with human psychology that should gradually become integrated into how you naturally operate in the world. The goal is not to become someone who consciously manipulates others, but to become someone who unconsciously understands people so deeply and communicates so effectively that positive influence becomes a natural expression of who you are. The more you practice these methods with genuine care and ethical intention, the more unconsciously competent you become, until they're no longer conscious strategies you have to remember to use, but simply natural aspects of your personality and your way of being in the world. The forbidden knowledge is now yours. Use it wisely, use it ethically, and use it to create the life and relationships you truly want. The game is always being played whether you know the rules or not. Now you know the rules. Now you can play to win.